Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of the Green New York Lunchtime Learning webinar series. My name is Brendan Woodruff. I'm the Director of Sustainability at New York State DEC, and I want to welcome everybody for joining us here. I know it's August. There's a lot of other stuff going on, so we thank you for taking the time to learn more about how you can live more sustainably. A couple housekeeping things before we do get started here today. Everybody is on mute because we do have quite a few people on the line today. If you have questions as we go along, please type them into the chat box. What we're going to do is I'll read the questions off to our presenters at the end. So any questions you have, please type them into the chat box as we go along. Also, this webinar is being recorded and it will be posted on the Green New York website afterwards. So if there's any slides you want to go back through and see or any other info you'd like to go back and review, you can find it there. It'll be up in the next couple days. I'll put the link in the chat box. Also, feel free to forward that to any colleagues that might not be able to make it here today as well. Another update here, our next Lunchtime Learning webinar is going to be on September 14th, and it's going to be on sustainable personal finance. So we've got Megan Boyce-Green from DEC Rhinestone Woods Environmental Education Center is going to talk about sustainable finance in your own life. So that's a really good topic coming up next month. And again, that's going to be on September 14th. So without further ado, I want to introduce today's webinar. We did electric vehicles 2 years ago. We had some folks from NYPA here presenting, and because this market is moving so fast and it's such a hot topic, we wanted to come back and revisit it 2 years later to kind of see where we're at in terms of the state of electric vehicles in New York State and what you need to know about the market if you're considering one of these vehicles. So I'm really happy to introduce two members of NYSERDA's Clean Transportation team here today to present to you, Jason Zimbler and David McCabe. Take it away.
Thanks, Brendan. Hey, this is Jason Zimbler. I'm a project manager in the Clean Transportation team in NYSERDA, and I'll pass it to Dave to introduce himself.
Both the Drive Clean rebate program for the purchase of electric vehicles and the Charge Ready New York program for the installation of electric vehicle charging stations.
Thanks, Dave. So we're happy to be joining you today and to be able to talk about some of the work we do and all of the exciting changes in this market. So this is an overview of electric vehicles and electric vehicle charging, and we'll take you through some of the case for that, the justification for the technology, and what's happening with the market. And we'll get into some of the challenges at the end and leave some time for questions. So jumping in right off the bat, we now are in the world of the community leadership, the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, the CLCPA. So we have some ambitious greenhouse gas reduction goals. And part of understanding those goals and where we are now and where we have to go is doing an inventory of our current state and what we see from the standpoint of GHG emissions by sectors. That transportation is the largest contributor to GHG in New York. Not the case globally, but it is the case in New York. A major factor, a major contributor with it when we zoom into that is the light duty segment. So 25% of all GHG in New York are coming from either vehicles or light duty trucks. Those are the kind of trucks that are under the weight class that are purchased by consumers generally, not commercial vehicles. And when we get to commercial vehicles, that makes up another 7% of emissions, and then 8% is going to come from other mobile sources like marine, airlines, airplanes, port equipment, so everything else that moves around, that moves goods or people. So let's go to the next slide, please. And here we're getting a quick overview of where we are, what we're trying to achieve, some of our near-term and long-term goals in the electric vehicle segment. We're looking at about 80,000 vehicles that are electrified or some form of electrified right now. That could be vehicles that either have a combustion engine and an electric drivetrain together, plug-in hybrids, or all electrics. But we have a big task to get to some of our greenhouse gas reduction goals. 850,000 is the commitment that we've made as one of the zero emission vehicle signatory states. So we're signed on to California's regulations. And so the goal in complying with those, that goal is to get to about 8 to 10% of the New York State vehicle fleet electric by 2025, out of a vehicle fleet of about 10 million in the state. There is a bill that's been passed by the legislature but not yet signed by the governor, to have all light duty sales zero emission vehicle by 2035, and another California ZEV goal that we've signed on to, which is to achieve medium and heavy duty electric vehicle sales by 2050. On the charging station side, there are about 7,000 today. We'll get into a breakdown of how that shakes down in terms of the speed of charging and where those chargers are located. We're focusing there on public charging, not on residential chargers. And the near-term goal is a 10,000 station installed base by the end of 2021. And with the pace of installations right now, we have a good chance of getting there. And another goal of having at least 10 non-Tesla fast charging sites in each region by the end of next year. As I said before, transportation is 40% of greenhouse gas. The goal is to reduce the greenhouse gas in New York 40% by 2030, 85% by 2050. And there is a commitment to have all of the transit buses for the major transit operators in New York all electric by 2040. Next slide, please. So why should you consider an EV? Well, there are a lot of good reasons. One is, and I think the main one is that it's a great car. They're fast. They have great smooth acceleration, instant torque, very technology rich. You can control a lot of the vehicle systems through smartphone apps, in terms of preheating the car or unlocking the car or finding charging. They're a lot of fun to drive, and the ownership experience is a really satisfying one. In terms of how they stack up against internal combustion engine vehicles or ICE vehicles, they are certainly cleaner. They are emissions free at the tailpipe if we're talking about all electrics, and they have a lower emissions if we're talking about a plug-in hybrid. And we'll get into the specifics of those in a later slide. They are increasingly sourced by renewables as New York's grid moves more and more towards wind and solar. Already has quite a bit of electricity in the state from hydro. So the EVs are getting cleaner over time, as opposed to combustion engine vehicles, which are getting dirtier over time. And they are smoother. They are smoother to ride in. There's no engine vibration and no noise. From the standpoint of maintenance and cost, they are cheaper to maintain. There's a premium for the initial purchase of an electric vehicle, but the total cost of ownership, which factors in both the original capital and the long-term operating costs, is starting to be and will be increasingly beneficial relative to combustion engines over time. Is already very close and is getting to be even better. They're cheaper because electric fuel is more cost effective than petroleum. You can, if you have a dedicated charging port, if you have a dedicated parking spot in your home, you can wake up every morning with a full battery, and there's less maintenance in owning an EV because there are fewer moving parts. There's only about 1/10 of as many moving parts in an EV as there is in a combustion engine. It's a much simpler car to build and maintain. From the standpoint of incentives, we'll get into this a little bit more, but there are some vehicle incentives at the state level. There are some vehicle incentives at the federal level, and there are some utility and charging station incentives at the state and utility level. And we'll go into that a little bit more. And one really important other thing is that from a standpoint of energy security, electricity benefits from being domestically produced, and allows us to source our own electricity, and that's sort of a national security win. And then also from the standpoint of efficiency of the vehicle, there is considerable greater efficiency with an electric vehicle than there is a combustion vehicle, for which a combustion vehicle loses a lot of the energy in the gasoline to heat when it's combusted, whereas an electric motor converts most of the energy in electricity to motion. All right, let's jump ahead. So EVs, we've talked about this just a second ago, but they are quantifiably cleaner because of the emissions that are associated with upstream emissions associated with electricity are less than the emissions that are produced by the gasoline that's burned in the vehicle as it moves around. But also there's some variability in that upstream emissions based on the carbon composition of the grid and the source electricity. So as you can imagine, grids that still have a little bit more solar have are relatively dirtier than grids that have more renewables in the mix. As you see from the graphic, upstate New York, because of the carbon composition of its electricity, produces the equivalent of a 230 mile per gallon vehicle, which is considerably less than a combustion engine. Let's go to the next slide, please. So to sort of close the gap on any questions about how these vehicles, what the terms that we're using are, and how the technology is deployed. On the left side, we're talking about ICE vehicles, internal combustion engine vehicles that only have a gasoline engine, and the fuel emission standards, the CAFE standards that are set by the federal government have been, slowly marching up, which means that those gasoline cars are getting cleaner over time, but that's relatively slow. And then when you get to hybrids like the Toyota Prius, they're introducing an electric motor into the drivetrain. It's a small motor, it's a small battery. It's improving your gasoline efficiency, your miles per gallon, but you're not really getting any propulsion or motoring under that electric motor. It's still only fueled by gasoline. When you move to a plug-in hybrid, now you have an electric motor that can actually power the vehicle entirely on the power that it produces and with the energy that's stored in the battery. It's a small battery, but for a lot of driving use cases, the average American drives about 30 miles a day. These batteries can produce about 30 to 40 miles of electric motoring, and so many of your use cases are covered by that electric drivetrain. And then there's a backup gasoline drivetrain that kicks in to extend your range to what we normally expect, which is around 300 miles of range. And so you get excellent gas mileage or excellent efficiency for that, the point at which the electric motor is working, and then you're even getting better gas mileage for when the gasoline engine takes over. And then moving to the fourth column, that's an all-electric vehicle. There is no gasoline engine in the mix. There's no backup system, but the batteries are larger. We're talking about batteries that can give you 200 plus miles, and in some cases 300, and getting up towards 400 miles of range in the larger battery all-electric vehicles. Next slide. Where are we in terms of numbers? There are 80,000 EVs on the road today, and that's the breakdown by region. Long Island leads. Downstate definitely is over-indexing relative to upstate, but there's excellent progress in the upstate metros and upstate in general. 110,000 vehicles have been registered, but some have moved out of state, some have gone off lease, some have come off of registration. So 80,000 are on the road today. Looking at the chart on the right, which is a view towards the future, the goal is to get to 850,000, as I said, in 2025, and somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 to 3 million by 2030. And again, it's a roughly 10 million vehicle fleet, total fleet size in New York. Next slide. And I think, Dave, are you taking over here, or should I go 2 more slides?
You got 2 more.
Okay, thanks. So what we're showing here is a really good story about the increased availability of EV product in the market, and that is reflected in the number of vehicles that are eligible to receive a rebate under our Drive Clean program. Dave's going to talk more at length about the program. but a really steady climb in the number of vehicles that are available in the market and ones that can receive a rebate. A snapshot on the right of vehicles that are available in 2021. The orange column is or gold column is all electric, battery electric vehicles. And the green columns are plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, which have, again, both the gasoline and electric motors. Next slide. Here, there was a sort of request to talk about how to help folks disambiguate the market or understand where to go and how to get the right information and how to choose an EV. There are many tools and resources available, a lot of car buying sites that can help you with some of that education. But a few of these that I wanted to capture for the group, the Department of Energy runs a search tool that is pretty useful. That's the energy.gov link. NYSERDA is contributing with other Northeast states, as well as a collaboration with automakers on a brand neutral EV marketing effort. And one of the outputs of that marketing effort is a site called Drive Change Drive Electric. And the link for that is the second link. And there's a nice vehicle explorer tool there, which gives you a view to some of the stats for all the vehicles many of the vehicles on the market with links to the automaker sites. And then Sierra Club also has a pretty good EV selection tool. So you can take a look at those. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dave.
Thanks, Jason. I'm going to talk about some of the current programs that are available. I'm going to touch mostly on the ones that NYSERDA administers, the Drive Clean Rebate Program and the Charge Ready New York program. But for light duty vehicles, there's the New York Drive Clean Rebate Program administered by NYSERDA. This is an $85 million program. We provide rebates of up to $2,000 per vehicle. The rebates are dependent on the EPA's all-electric range, and I'll go into those in the next couple of slides. There is also a federal tax credit that is available when you purchase a vehicle. This tax credit is up to $7,500. Again, this is dependent on the manufacturer of the vehicle. And depending on where you live, there are also some full discounts and HOV lane access rights that you can get. And I believe these are eligible through DMV. For the medium and heavy duty side, we also administer, NYSERDA does, the New York Truck Voucher Incentive Program. Neither Jason nor I are involved in this program, but if you have questions about this, we can answer them at the end of the program. We will put you in touch with someone at NYSERDA who does run this program. So the Drive Clean Rebate Program is based on the EPA's all-electric range. The rebate levels are listed here. If the vehicle gets less than 40 miles on all-electric range, it is eligible for a $500 rebate. These are mostly the plug-in hybrid vehicles. If the vehicle gets between 40 and 199 miles, it is eligible for a $1,000 rebate. If the vehicle will get over 200 miles, it is eligible for a $2,000 rebate. With the exception of any vehicle that has an MSRP of over $42,000, these vehicles are only eligible for a $500 rebate regardless of the electric range. So the way this program works, it is a point of sale rebate. The rebate is given by the dealerships to the customer during the vehicle transaction. So what you would do is once you decide on the vehicle that you would like to purchase, you will go to a participating dealership. There are roughly 1,000 dealerships in New York State. Close to 800 of those dealerships are participating dealerships in the Drive Clean Rebate Program. These dealerships are listed on our website. So you can go to our website and make sure that the dealership that you're going to be buying your vehicle from participates in the program and is eligible to provide the rebate to you at the point of sale. It is not a rebate that you can get after you purchase the vehicle on your own. It has to be done through the dealership. So to date, we have approved close to 50,000 rebates for close to $74 million, leaving us with a remaining balance of about $11 million. As Jason mentioned earlier, there are 65 vehicles that are eligible in the Drive Clean Rebate Program. 27 of these have an electric range of over 100 miles. Of these, 20 have an electric range of over 200 miles, with 7 of over 300 miles. Now, 6 of these top 20 models are eligible for the full $2,000 rebate. The remaining 13, even though they get over a 200-mile range, are not eligible for the $2,000 rebate because of the MSRP cap. They exceed the $42,000. Now I'm going to talk about some of the elements of the Charge Ready New York program. First, I just want to go through some basics on charging. Level 1 charging is equivalent to plugging in your car to a regular outlet in your home. We refer to this as trickle charging. This would take a long time to charge your vehicle, but typically after a day's travel, you can plug in and you would be fully charged overnight. Level 2 charging, these are located at places where you would go and spend a few hours, such as a shopping mall, a restaurant, workplaces, places of this nature. These are faster than a level 1 charger, but they would take about 2 to 5 hours to fully charge your car. And then the DC fast chargers, these are much more expensive, but much faster. You can charge a vehicle in as little as 20 minutes on a DC fast charger. So as Jason mentioned earlier in this presentation, there are about 7,000 charging ports in New York State. This is up from, as you can see on this chart, in 2018, when the Charge Ready New York program launched, we had about 1,500 ports in the state, with a goal of getting to 10,000 ports by the end of 2021. We are currently on track to get very close, if not exceed, that 10,000 ports by the end of this year. So the Charge Ready New York program is a $17 million program. Through this program, we provide $4,000 per port. These are for level 2 chargers only, so it doesn't include the fast chargers. We also have a $500 bonus if you're doing your installation in a disadvantaged community. That bonus is automatically calculated in the application process. Once you put in the address of the site, it will determine whether you are in a DAC or not and add that bonus if you are. NYSERDA also administers a DCFC incentive. It's an $11 million program that Jason runs. If you have questions, Jason can answer those at the end of the presentation. But this will provide up to 80% of the purchase and installation costs. There are other programs such as the Make Ready programs. This was a PSC order that all utilities provide for charging in New York State. These Make Ready programs pay for upgrades to your utility system up to, from the customer side, up to the charger. And then the Charge Ready New York program will pay for the cost of the installation from the charger out. So combining those two, you can install chargers for little to no cost, depending on where you are and what the installation is. NYPA also has the Evolve program. Through the Evolve program, NYPA is installing 200 fast chargers in New York State. They are installing 4 ports at 50 different locations along major corridors in New York State. Through through the Charge Ready New York program, we have approved over 3,000 charging ports, totaling about $12.5 million. There is roughly $4.5 million remaining in this program. Of these ports that have been approved, over 1,600 of them are in public locations. Over 800 are in workplace locations, and over 650 of them are in multi-unit dwelling locations. Now
Thanks,
we're going to
Dave.
talk about some key future activities, and I'll turn this back over to Jason.
Sorry, jumping on there. Thank you. Okay, so just a few kind of quick view into what's coming for us and some of the work NYSERDA is doing and some of other agencies and authorities in New York. There's been evolution in the vehicle incentives over time as we've seen the market develop, and we expect to continue to tune and tweak and develop vehicle incentives to encourage more purchases and to help us achieve the ambitious vehicle electrification goals for all vehicle classes, light duty, medium, and heavy duty. And the work that we're doing in part is to help with education and to sort of close the gap on knowledge with things like this and with other outreach and education activities, contractors who will be out in the state trying to help educate dealers, educate consumers, host ride and drives, show up in public places to help people understand EV technology and guide them to some of those choices, both for consumers and for businesses. So we have some more work, plenty of work to do there. On the charging station side, because it is really where the state can play, because infrastructure is so key to creating the conditions for people to buy an EV. And so we've been doing a ton of work on level 2. As Dave was talking about, we're starting to get more active with building and developing programs to build fast charging. So you're seeing more investment in charging. EVSE is electric vehicle supply equipment, which is synonymous with chargers, charging stations, and charging infrastructure. So we're trying to continue to push the ball down the field on charging and look for other ways that the charging stations can be viable business models. As Dave mentioned, there was a make-ready order from the Public Service Commission in the middle of last year, and one of the features of that program is a midpoint review, at which time some of the rates involved with electric vehicle charging are examined, and some of the incentive levels are examined to see if it's consistent with achieving the goals that were set out in the order. So that process, that midpoint review, and those changes will start next year. One of the key factors in getting charging right and making it grid beneficial is timing EV charging with low peak parts of the day. Overnight is an excellent example of when charging can be beneficial to the grid, not requiring supply upgrades, but taking advantage of existing grid infrastructure and grid supply. So managed charging is a very important aspect to not just owning a charger and owning an EV, but to getting the policies and programs right so that folks are encouraged to charge overnight, either through incentives or through software and things like that. So we're doing R&D on that in that area, and we'll be continuing to do that. New York has the highest concentration of multi-unit dwelling residents of any state in the union. So we have a unique challenge with folks who are sort of garage orphans, as it's called, don't have a dedicated parking spot, don't have the ability to install a charging station or even an outlet next to where they charge. So the availability of more public charging is key to assist those without dedicated charging access. Charging station interoperability is really important. We showed on the earlier slide, there are a number of different ports and plugs involved with charging stations and the charging technology. That's starting to centralize, but we're trying to advocate for and try to encourage the market to adopt interoperability standards, allowing customers to use all different stations and all different and simplifying the number of ports that are out there. Siting is a challenge for developers, so we're working to help educate municipalities and AHJs on how to improve timelines for siting, and also encouraging the use of EV charging requirements for new buildings, for building codes for new buildings, and even for retrofits, because that's a key aspect of getting charging to be more accessible and universal. Next slide. So providing a few links here and our contact info. I'm sure that Brendan can share the slides with everybody, and we're always open for conversation, questions, and ideas. Some of the links that of the programs we talked about are there. We can guide you to anything else, other relevant info sources as needed, and happy to take any questions. Yeah, thanks everybody.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was a fantastic presentation. And we have quite a few questions that have come in here. So I think we're going to try and get through as many as we can, kind of rapid fire if we can. Some of these are about technology and other about policies as well. So we'll get started here. One of the questions is, from an environmental perspective, depending on what you're driving now, is there kind of a sweet spot for when you should be looking at an EV? For example, if you have kind of like a midlife pickup truck versus an older, traditional hybrid or something like that, because there are a lot of resources that go into making the vehicle itself. So from an emissions perspective, do you have any kind of guidance on that, depending on where someone is with their current vehicle, even if they want to go electric?
Yeah, there is analysis on this, and I'm sorry I don't have it off the top of my head. When to maximize, how much life to get out of a combustion engine before switching, in terms of creating new emissions with the manufacture of the EV. That is something that scientists and researchers have looked at. I'd have to come back to you to answer the question. Generally speaking, when you're at the end of when you're ready to buy a new car, the sensible choice is to choose an electric, but whether to shorten the life of the car is a really important question, and I would need to look to the research on that.
Mm-hmm. The next question here was about replacement batteries for vehicles. Do you have any information on, as a vehicle reaches the end of its life, if that's an option?
Yeah, these all electrics and the vehicles are under conventional warranties, even the electric vehicles. So batteries are going to be a component that will be serviced under a warranty. But yeah, I think the question alludes to the fact that batteries degrade over time, and you lose range as you own the vehicle. So when it's off of warranty, if you wanted to continue to own it, you'd have a lower range car. There is, I don't know that it's a very ubiquitous available option right now, because EVs are relatively new in the market. But I know that you could have a battery swapped out. It may be more practical at that point to buy or lease a new car or a used EV that has a younger, healthier battery.
Mm-hmm. And do you have to do anything specific for your electrical at home to recharge the vehicle, or can you just plug it into a regular outlet?
Yeah. Can you go back to slide 13? You absolutely can charge your vehicle on a standard home outlet, a 110, 120 outlet. It's slow. As Dave said, it's a trickle charge. It could be more than a day to refill a battery. That's a ton of time. Your home often has a 240 volt outlet as well, probably for your dryer, if you have an electric dryer, or for your fridge or your stove. And that 240 volt outlet is what an EV would need to charge at level 2. And so you could have a level 2 outlet installed in your garage near your car, if you have a garage, and if you have enough amperage left in your panel. And at that point, you're getting a 6 to 7 time, or actually even more, can be 10 or 11, 12 times greater speed of charging over of our standard outlet. So yes, you can charge on a basic outlet, but it's slow.
Mhm. And one person here that owns an EV wanted us to mention that there's no oil. You don't have to get oil changes with them, and that is something to consider if it is a more upfront price, the fact that you're not having to get that regular service and maintenance. Another question here was the difference between EVs and PZEVs that you might see. I know there's a lot of vehicles out there that have PZEV on it. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I think it's, if I'm understanding the question correctly, it's plug-in all electrics versus plug-in hybrid electrics. And
I think this one is for the partial zero emission that you see
partial
on some
zero
ICE cars.
emission would be those which are not full zero emission. So zero emission vehicle could be an electric vehicle or a hydrogen vehicle, fuel cell vehicle, but a partial zero emission would be, I suppose, one that also has a plug-in, also has a combustion engine and can take advantage of that combustion engine to extend the range, and then would have lower emissions than a standard ICE vehicle, but is not also completely zero emission.
Mhm. And how many BEVs are below 42,000 that qualify for the full rebate versus how many are over that price?
There are 6 models currently that are eligible for the full $2,000 rebate out of those 13 that have a range of greater than 200 miles. 6 of those 20 that have a range greater than 200 miles are eligible for the full $2,000 rebate. I think that there's probably, if you're counting the ones that are between 40 and 199 miles of range, there's probably another 10 models. So there's about 15 models that are under 42K.
Okay, so there's some good choice there.
Yeah.
And the EV Ready program that's through Con Ed, are there any plans to have versions of that through the other utilities? This person is in the NYSEG territory.
Yeah, that Make Ready program is predominantly focused on providing incentives for public charging, public and workplace and multi-unit dwelling charging, similar to our Charge Ready incentive. It is not for home charging. It's not for the installation of residential level 2 chargers. That there isn't a ton of programming right now on that. I can describe a little bit of that, but the Make Ready program, each utility, each of the 6 IOUs, so we're talking about everything but the LIPA territory, all utilities but the LIPA territory are participating in the Make Ready program and provide incentives for the infrastructure upgrades for public charging, both level 2 chargers and fast chargers. So if you are looking to install some charging that meets those requirements, then each of the utilities has a program that you can apply to and have a 90 or 100% of the cost taken up by the utility.
Mm-hmm. And can you talk a little bit about battery life and performance based on the weather? So really cold days or really hot days?
Yeah, of course. That is a real issue for EV ownership. There is a loss of range that happens both in cold and warm weather. And there's some interesting graphics that can show you sort of a heat map of what your range is at different temperatures. I could find that and send that to Brendan. But the challenge with on the cold weather side is that you don't get the free heat that a combustion engine produces through combustion that would normally be wasted and can be recaptured for cabin heating. You don't get that with an EV, so you have to generate heat, which takes away from your your mobility range. And on the AC side, your AC that you're having to run also eats into your electric, into your battery range, and then reduces your range for travel. This can be, when you're in shoulder months, the fall and the spring, there is not too much of a significant loss of your range, maybe 10%. So a fair amount of the year you're going to be in good conditions, but at the height of the summer and the winter, you're going to have a lot of cabin heating and cooling going on. So you could lose 20 to maybe 30% of your range, and that is notable and requires more trips to charging stations for longer trips. It's not so much an issue for many of the daily driving use cases.
Mm-hmm. And another question here that came in, do you know what utilities are doing about demand charges related to EV charging stations? Are there any programs to try and lower the demand charges that a facility might incur?
The make-ready order did contemplate the impact of demand charges and was interested in examining the data from the stations that got built in the first half of the program before the commission and before DPS staff proposed alternate rate structures for demand charges, which, for those less familiar, can be a very significant barrier to building fast charging stations. And the fewer fast charging stations we have, the less confident people are in buying EVs. So there's a real impact there. But there is no movement yet. But the midpoint review is coming up next year, and I can tell you that unsurprisingly, the utilization of chargers is low, and so demand charges are a very difficult economic reality. So I would suspect that these kinds of challenges will be looked at, and I don't know what the solution will be, but it's a challenge for building stations for sure.
Mm-hmm. And another question here about battery recycling and the end of life care of batteries and how that impacts the overall environmental performance of the vehicle's kind of emissions profile.
Yeah, again, this is a field of study of inquiry that's had a lot of purchase with researchers looking at well to wheels or full life cycle environmental cost for EVs. And my understanding is that from the research that I've seen, even with battery recycling and battery end of life, there is still an overall advantage in carbon between an EV and an ICE vehicle. And as we've said, that will improve because of the renewable mix of the upstream electricity. But the battery recycling will mature, and more use cases will develop for converting mobile batteries into second and third life stationary batteries. So there's a lot to kind of still happen in the market there.
And do you have to be a New York resident to be able to take advantage of the Drive Clean rebate program? I know that we have a number of state staff in the tri-state area, especially, that might work in New York but live in New Jersey or Connecticut.
Yes, they do. They have to be a New York State resident, and they have to remain a New York State resident for 3 years. And there's a recapture fund, a recapture clause if they move out of state. Say after 18 months, they would have to repay 50% of the rebate to us.
Okay. And do you know if those states have rebate programs that they could look into?
I know that New Jersey is looking into one. I know that Connecticut has one. Massachusetts has one. I'm not sure about Pennsylvania.
Mhm. And if anybody, just to let you know, type in any final questions you have here. I really appreciate your patience here as we kind of do rapid fire. But we do have a ton of questions that have come in. So another question here, do DC fast charges burn up the battery lifetime, or do they negatively affect the battery's performance over time?
Yeah, that is a real factor. If all of your charging was fast charging, your battery would likely deteriorate quicker, because the high voltage creates it does not. I mean, there's a whole chemistry, much more sophisticated explanation, but at work are available. But you know, the key is that the fast charging at such high voltage can create sort of debris around the battery leads, and that could over time, you know, reduce the battery's capacity. So what you would want to do as an EV owner, and of course this depends on whether or not you have access to slower charging on a more regular basis, but you would want to do the bulk of your charging, and most people do, at level 1 or level 2 speeds, which don't have that same consequence. And then you do a sort of minimum of your charging at fast charging speeds, and you also don't go as often, as frequently as possible, you don't go beyond 80% of your battery capacity, which also helps with preventing that deterioration.
Mm-hmm. And we had a few people ask about the slides. If you would like to get the slides sent to you, please put your email in the chat box. I can get those over to you. And as I mentioned before, a recording of this will be on the Green New York website, and I dropped a link to that in the chat box here, so you will be able to see that as well. Another question here is, are there any rebates or tax credits for electric motorcycles?
Unfortunately, no. That's one of the rules of the program, is that it must be a four-wheeled, highway-capable vehicle. So motorcycles currently are not eligible.
Mm-hmm. And as I'm just waiting to see if any final questions do come in, do you have any final thoughts for people when it comes to EVs?
Well, it's not a niche anymore. It's not a science project. I hope that's the takeaway. They're a fantastic car. I'm an EV owner myself, and certainly the coolest car I've ever owned. You know, range anxiety is a thing. I wouldn't diminish that. You know, if you have if your lifestyle includes lots of long distance travel between cities, you know, visiting family or whatnot, you'd want to certainly look at maps of charging stations. A good resource is plugshare.com to see what charging stations exist, and you would want to be looking for fast charging. You'd want to be filtering on fast charging to know, you know, that there's a lot of charging on the place in the routes that you go. But it's range anxiety, while it is a factor, it has not been a challenge for me, and that's of course anecdotal, but I think you know, much of your driving, especially if you're a family with two vehicles and one is a combustion vehicle, much of your driving can be done with an EV and be done without concern for range. And yeah, I think it's a purchase that people should really start to consider. And there's now the possibility that the federal tax credit will be restored and even expanded in this next bill that's being considered by the Senate and by the government, and that would create an even larger incentive on the federal side for getting into an EV. So exciting time.
Yeah, and once again, I want to thank you for taking the time to present to us today. This was absolutely fantastic, and thank you again for the lightning round here at the end for the questions. I really appreciate you staying with us to get through that. We have a very engaged group here, and it's one of the things I love about these webinars that we have. So Thank you very much. Folks, again, our next webinar is going to be on Tuesday, September 14th on sustainable personal finance. And we'll be sending out the information for that, and you can register for it on the Green New York website. So thanks a lot, everybody. Have a good day, and we'll see you next month.
Brendan?
Oh, yep.
Yeah, I see there are a few. I was just looking at the Q&A, and I saw a few others that we didn't touch. If you want to, we can respond to them if you're not trying to close right now.
We are running short on time.
Okay. Then we can just you can send. We can email back and forth, and you could send them out.
Yep. Yeah, I'll make sure that I can. I'll copy and paste them here.
Great.
Yep. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Brendan.
Take care.